Boy Manning here. Welcome to a midweek edition of the Garden Report. Just a couple weeks till training camp, so we're gonna get into some of the biggest Celtics questions. I got a center conversation, film, debate, breakdown thing coming down on who might start alongside Kristaps Porzingis. I've put an article up on it on CLNSmedia.com, but I want to bounce around the East a little bit too as camp begins, and I've been meaning to do a Heat show since the Damian Lillard trade talks started and stalled and appear at a standstill for now. And Wes Goldberg's back, great friend of the show here. Last talked to you before Game 7, which went in a direction I don't think either of us saw going, whether you thought the Heat were going to win or not. It just ended up being a blowout with that crazy home court and all the momentum swinging Boston's direction. So going into this year, Wes, my thought is it's tough to give the Celtics the benefit of the doubt come playoff time over Miami, even with the changes they made. And I'll get your thoughts on those later. But also considering that Damian Lillard could be joining this team by playoff time too. So we know the deal at this point. Nothing that happens in the regular season matters in Miami. Once they get into the playoffs, it's going to be a whole different conversation. And that's probably more true than ever this year because they lost some key guys. It's probably going to take a while to sort out this Lillard situation. And they've now defeated the Celtics in 2 of the last 3 East Finals they faced in and almost had them in the third. So you got to give Miami, even if you don't go into the season saying that they're the favorite, and you probably shouldn't, the benefit of the doubt that they could get hot at the right time late, beat the Celtics at the very least, and we'll see from there.
I guess surprised to hear you say that because I still don't think
I've been traumatized by a couple of East Finals.
I don't know that I would even say that the Miami Heat should be considered favorites in the East. You know what I mean? And
No, they shouldn't be. I'd say over the Celtics in a series.
I see what you mean. Well, in that case, I mean, look, the Miami Heat are sort of the Boston Celtics boogeyman, right? Like, there's not. They seem to get in their heads, and it's interesting the whole Marcus Smart thing. People are like understandably concerned, like he was the heart and soul of the team, he was the tough guy, the whole thing. Like, if you lose him, where are you kind of getting that edge from? And I guess my counterpoint to that has been for a couple months now. It's like, well, it hasn't really helped them win the championship. You know what I mean? Like, if on one hand, Boston's problem is that they're a little soft when, on the biggest stage. The other thing can't also be true. It's like, well, they're kind of soft, but the heart and soul of the team is gone. It's like, well, if the heart and soul of the team is soft, then it shouldn't really matter if the tough guy is gone, because obviously he wasn't tough enough. I know that's like kind of distilling it down a little bit too much, but I am curious to see how Marcus Smart leaving forces Tatum and Jaylen Brown to take on more of a leadership roles in that locker room and see if it changes the personality, which again, talent has never been Boston's issue, whether or not it's toughness, softness, whatever it is. Again, that stuff is so overstated and binary. They just needed a change. And I think that getting Kristaps Porzingis is obviously a big part of that trade. But I think a big part of that trade too was just sort of challenging Tatum and Brown to be the leaders that they didn't really have to be. They could just sort of do the scoring and all the stuff that they do so well and leave all the leadership stuff to Marcus Smart and whoever was the head coach. Now it kind of puts the onus on them to step up in that way.
Yeah, and you said everything I've said pretty much since the trade happened. This is a move to force Brown and Tatum to step into those leadership roles. If you were going to make a change at some point that didn't involve Brown or Tatum, it probably had to be Smart, and you never would have known what would happen if you never did it. Especially before making a move on Brown, which we'll get to in the coming years based on how things go this year. But you got a lot back for Smart looking back on it. And I don't love the move. I do think the leadership and intangible issues might be in other places here. We'll see. Again, it's on Brown and Tatum to finally lead this team where it needs to go now at this point. There's really no other excuse left. They've messed with everything else, the coach, the Smart, all the way down the line. They've gotten them role players. Now they've gotten them a third star. So this is a huge year for them. There's no doubt about it. But I do worry a little bit about what taking Smart out of the room does, at least in terms of accountability for this group, judging on how Joe coached his team last year. And maybe he'll make some adjustments going in. I'm very interested to just see the whole demeanor of this team and how they're looking at this team come this season come media day. But for Porzingis specifically, and I guess we'll start out with the Celtics, I watched a lot of film on him this summer, and I especially watched a lot of film of him against the Heat for obvious reasons. And the numbers weren't great, especially the shooting numbers in those games. But just looking at the film, there was some interesting stuff he did against them. And obviously, he had a great post up season, great season inside the arc. The mid range with him is just about as good as the three. But the Wizards did some good stuff in terms of getting him the ball inside, having him make quick decisions against the zone. And of course, that middle area is with a big guy who can see over the defense, and all of that is kind of what you want against a Heat zone defense that has really challenged the Celtics offense in recent years. And it's obviously just another guy that you have to account for on this offense that can be pretty explosive for Boston.
Yeah, Boston's bigs haven't really given Miami any problems over the last couple of
They
years.
don't score.
They don't score. And Porzingis, to your point, the numbers haven't been good. They weren't good for the Wizards, but the Wizards weren't good. So, it's like which one? It's like chicken or the egg type deal.
Yeah.
Porzingis on paper is sort of a problem for the Heat for all the reasons you already laid out. And then just in a vacuum, I thought Porzingis played the best basketball of his career last season. It wasn't as loud and as big as his days when he was playing at Madison Square Garden, obviously, but I thought he was making quick decisions. I thought defensively he was as good as he's ever been. Again, like so many blocked shots and stuff like that when he played for the Knicks, but just like positional defense, it was better last year than it had been in any other point of his career. I spoke with him last year for a feature I wrote on him too, and he felt the same way. And he felt like if his numbers, like you said, the shooting numbers were sort of up and down, and he said that he's like, if I can just get the shooting to where I know I can get it, like just watch my game take off, I think I could be an all-star again. And I think I agree with him. It kind of feels like the injury issues are a little bit behind him now. And with his size and he's a good shooter. He's got that ability. And when the decision making gets better and he's better at like kind of putting the ball on the floor and just driving, he doesn't necessarily have to dunk. He doesn't have to do anything flashy, but he could just kind of be a 3 and at the rim kind of guy offensively. The post up stuff you already mentioned is pretty good. I don't know if it's that might be his career best last year, but it's still going to be pretty good in terms of his numbers. And then defensively, I think he's really solid. And you pair him with a guy like Al Horford or Robert Williams or whatever they end up doing in the front court. You can obviously play KP at the 5 if you want to and go smaller. I really like that move for Boston. I liked it right away. I actually don't worry about losing Marcus Smart at all. And as from the Heat's perspective, I think you've got to be a little bit worried about how well balanced that roster is, and maybe that makeup chain. It's like, okay, like we kind of knew what this thing was. We kind of had their number for the last couple of years. Is this going to make it that much different? It's just you got to approach with a little bit more caution. I think if you're the Miami Heat than you did in the past. I still think that at the end of the day, they've got Jimmy Butler, they've got the DNA, and they've got like the stuff that has given Boston problems. And I probably still would take Miami in a series, to your point, if we're talking about playoff series. But I don't know. I think the Celtics will be better. I do.
They should be if they're healthy, and that's probably the largest concern here is the health factor with him. I don't know what he told you on the health front, when you talked to him about last year and just how
he said the same thing every player says. I feel great. My body's never been better.
Whatever. And it was true for him last year. He played a lot compared to
60-something games, right?
65, yeah. The All-NBA rule, we can call it the Porzingis.
Yeah, the Porzingis line.
And he hasn't been an all-star either, so they can actually rest him with this new rule here, which helps them. They get the interchangeable bigs. There's definitely balance, as you say there. We'll see what happens with Brogdon. That's a conversation for another day in terms of his health and where he's at coming into this season.